Yo, what's going on, Cowboys fans? This is your boy Fuster King. Now, on this channel, this has been a channel, right, where we come in and it was built off the draft, and we really wanted to just get the information. But as the channel was grown, as my following has grown, I wanted to make sure that I reach out to the right people. Now, this is a young man young old man, a swagged out dude. Somebody who I met actually at training camp probably about 3 years ago. We had a brief conversation, 3, 4 years ago. We had a brief conversation just about, Dallas and, who how he got into the game and stuff like that and things like that. And then now, circle back 3 years from now, we're here. Mr. John Machota. I don't have all the special effects, but John, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
No, man, no problem at all. No need for special effects. You're all good.
John, you're somebody who I follow for a while, and I think that when it comes to being on the beat and covering the team and getting us information and asking the hard questions, I think really you're second to none, and you're definitely on the come up. John, and as people are pulling up here and the numbers are going up, kind of give us just a quick, we're going to get to the Cowboys because people want to talk about the information, all that type of stuff. But kind of just give us a rundown of how you got started covering the Cowboys.
So I'm originally from Michigan. Warren is where I grew up, a suburb of Detroit. And I really didn't think I was going to be a sports writer when I was in high school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something with sports, but I really didn't think like even writing about sports was something that I was a good enough writer to do. So just kind of as time went on, I ended up going to Wayne State in Detroit and got my degree in journalism. And while I was there, I started helping out at the Detroit Free Press, just basically with their sports section, doing whatever I could, going to practices, things like that, whether it was, Tigers, Michigan State, covering high schools. And I really, at the time, was like, man, I'd love to be like a Detroit Lions beat writer or a Detroit Pistons beat writer. I think I really got a passion for doing it in probably like 2004 because I'm a big Pistons fan and they won it all that year, and I just followed them so closely for the next probably 3-4 years, and so that's when I really paid attention a lot to different writers and how they kind of did their thing. And I had an editor at the Detroit Free Press who ended up moving down to Dallas, and I wasn't getting a full-time gig in Detroit. And he was like, hey, if you're willing to come down to Dallas, I got plenty of freelance down here, and maybe down the line, there'll be something full-time. And I was 28 at the time. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. This was like end of 2010. And I was like, yeah, I'll come down there. And I didn't know if I'd be down here for like a year or two or whatever. And I was doing a lot of high schools, and then he's like, well, if you want, you can go out to Valley Ranch and just help out with the Cowboys coverage. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that for sure. And did that long enough to where in 2014, the Cowboys website was going to hire me full time, and I was going to take it. And the morning news was like, no, don't take that. Don't take that. We'll hire you full time. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was just one of those things like in the business where you're just like, oh, so like when you have like someone else that wants, then you have to have that, kind of leverage type thing, which was great for me. And it worked out great. And so started covering the team full time in 2014. And I mean, I'm not lying when I say this. I really do have my dream job. Like I never would have thought that I would have a chance to cover the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, I'm 41. So I remember vividly that Cowboys run in the 90s and how dominant they were, even in Detroit. I mean, they were on TV all the time. And it was like larger than life, that whole Cowboys thing. So then when they're sending me out to Valley Ranch and I'm just seeing all this stuff, because Valley Ranch was the home for all that 90s stuff, and I just fell in love with it. And so even when I wasn't full time, I was still going out to Valley Ranch as much as possible and just hoping that one day I could, become a full-time Cowboys writer. And now that it's happened, it's just like, there's like nothing else I want to do. People ask me all the time, do you want to be an NFL writer? Is there another team you want to cover? There's not another team, another sport, anything. Like I hate the cold weather. So living down in Dallas is perfect for me. Like we don't get any bad weather, winters. And then I don't really mind the heat. And then even when it gets really bad here, we go to California for training camp. And so, it's a blessing, man. I'm very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Oxnard isn't a bad place to go. And it's so interesting, John, because being a basketball fan and I am, Rasheed Wallace,
oh yeah,
that whole grit of Detroit. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That you were able to see those championships, and obviously Cowboys fans want to see Dallas win a championship. Hey, Aisha Morrison is in the chat, another one of our friends. And I know you work close with her as
Yeah. Yeah.
well. Um, so John, you've been on the beat for a long time. And before we get into this roster, and we're going to talk about this roster, I kind of want you to talk about. I had another question, but want you to talk about the changeover from Garrett's regime to now, because I've seen some things draft wise, I've seen some things mentality wise. But if you could just kind of give like a brief synopsis of like, okay, when Garrett was here, this was some things, these were some characters that they would stay away from. McCarthy's here and it's different. So just what are your thoughts from that regime to now?
Yeah, it's funny because you'd sit there and think that with Garrett, it would be, there was always that Garrett guy, right kind of guy stuff. But
Yeah,
when Garrett was here, they also went and got Greg Hardy.
that's
So,
true.
um, with Mike McCarthy, I mean, there's a lot of similarities with how they are able to do the job. And when I say that, I mean, like they both have say in the draft.
Yeah.
It's not like one had that much more say than the other. But the biggest difference is just that was, I mean, that's Jason Garrett's first head coaching job. Where Mike McCarthy comes in, you have expectations. You're like, this guy's already won a Super Bowl. So I would say this is probably the best behind the scenes thing that I could tell you about the difference between the two. And it comes down to practice. Yeah. Jason Garrett, during a practice when all the position groups were broken down, like, D-line's working down the end of the field, receivers are closer to where the media is at, whatever. Jason Garrett's bouncing around to every different group. Yeah. Mike McCarthy's not really doing that. He's focused on his own thing. He's not like Jason Garrett. You could just tell was a former player. You watch some of the games before the game. Jason Garrett would be out there warming up, throwing the football with Dak. Like, Mike McCarthy's not going to do that. Mike McCarthy is just so much more of a CEO coach. And I've always got the feel from Mike McCarthy where he kind of allows things to be hands off, because you just get the sense he wants the players to kind of build it. Dak Prescott needs to be the leader of this team. And obviously they're very fortunate to have someone who, I mean, I don't think you could have any better leadership qualities than him. And there's several others, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, guys like that. Whereas I feel like Jason Garrett was a little bit more hands-on in terms of, that leadership stuff. But also from the same sense, Jason Garrett was taking over something and they were kind of turning around the roster in 11. Whereas Mike McCarthy's taken over. This wasn't like a rebuild when McCarthy took over. It seemed like it a little bit because 2020 was such a disaster with the pandemic, and obviously
it was a bad year.
And then what they did on defense was just a huge swing and miss. And so I just don't get the sense that Mike McCarthy really cares about having, his stamp on every single part of the team, where I think Jason Garrett really liked that. He really liked, being in and out of all these different groups. Whereas I think Mike McCarthy's kind of more of the CEO coach, which is going to be interesting to see this year, because he's going to have to be more hands-on, because now he's calling the plays and he's in the offensive meeting rooms every day.
Yeah, you know what, John, I want to piggyback to something you said, that he wanted them to kind of figure it out, right? And with Kellen Moore, right, in their relationship, I always tell people, a lot of people will ask me, well, Foots, why doesn't he take over play calling right now? And I would tell them, that's just not how it works when it comes to coaching. Kellen had his stuff in. I believe that the Joneses wanted Kellen Moore to develop here. And I think that Mike said, you're going to call it, right? I'm going to oversee it. But it really was Kellen's stuff. I think that Mike now has who he needs in the building, first of all, with the draft and obviously the pieces that he wants. And I think now it's a much more comfortable situation. Would you agree with that, John, or you disagree? Or
No, I agree with that. The thing with Kellen Moore too, though, is that, he comes from being a teammate with Dak Prescott. And so they have a, close bond, close relationship. And so Kellen Moore's offense is going to be designed that, hey, he's going to be doing things that Dak wants to do. There's not going to be a lot of things that Kellen Moore's putting out there that Dak doesn't want to do. And so this is obviously going to be a change to him. Mike McCarthy wasn't going to, you just got this, he wasn't going to be able to take over the offense in the middle of a season, because it really wasn't his pound for pound offense under Kellen Moore. And so that would have been, as much as some people think that happens and all of a sudden it's this, rocket fuel and the team just takes off, there is a far greater chance you do something like that and it's an epic disaster and the team splinters and it just completely falters and
Yeah.
you just have a disaster. I mean, you want to complain about losing to the Niners in the playoffs? I'm talking about like not even making the playoffs, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I think that he avoided doing that. But now we're at a stage now where it's like, okay, it's time. You have to make this Super Bowl run, or I mean, Jerry Jones is going to go in another direction. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just how it is, you know? And so because of that, I think that's why he was like, all right, well, it's time now. I'm going to put it, I have a full off season to do this. Let me get an offensive coordinator, you know, in Schottenheimer that I know we're on the same page, so he can help implement what I want to do. But at the same time, it's not like he's going to completely gut the offense and put in something brand new. I mean, at the end of the day, Dak Prescott's the most tenured quarterback in the NFC. You're going to do things that are going to help Dak be the most successful. So this isn't high school where it's like, no, this is my system and you're going to run it like how I want it.
Yeah.
It's about making Dak Prescott as comfortable and as successful as possible.
Yeah. And I think that will be the plan moving forward, and a few questions that we'll get to later. So and I've given Dak at times a hard time, you know, the kind of fan and the fan of me and covering the team. But it's also like when you really step back and think about it, I mean, the dude's a top 10 quarterback. If you have that, you have a chance to win in the NFL. And I think the way that this team has turned around this defense, which we'll talk about later, John, I feel like that may be their calling card moving forward. All right, John, I want to get your thoughts on the draft. We go Mozzie Smith. Okay, you go Luke Schoonmaker, who obviously has the injury right now. I know Cowboys Nation is kind of in a panic. They go Overshown. They go Junior Frayoko, Deuce Vaughn, Eric Scott, and a few other. Awesome Richards, who is somebody who I'm really high on. And then Lukey is one of the undrafted free agents, who's somebody that we'll talk about later. To you, if you had to put a bow on the draft or a theme around the draft, how would you do that? What picks do you like? What was their plan of attack with this draft, this 2023 class?
Well, they clearly wanted to fill tight end. With losing Schultz, they clearly wanted to get tight end. I thought they would draft a running back higher than they did. So
interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit of a surprise that they didn't get one in the first, 3 or 4 rounds.
Can you stay there? Why, John?
Yeah. Just because I think you need to be constantly looking towards the future. Yeah. And maybe they, and then you also hear things too that they're interested in all the running backs too. So that also kind of tips you off. But at the same time, let's be honest, it's not like every running back is the exact same. You want to get a running back that's probably somewhat of a compliment to Tony Pollard. So that might knock a lot of running backs off the list. You're not just going to draft one just to draft one. And so probably when their picks came up, the running backs that were there, they didn't necessarily love them at that point. And so they weren't going to force anything. I thought left guard was something that they would address too, maybe a little bit earlier. So I still sit there right now thinking left guard and running back. Those are two positions that, people talk about the, DeAndre Hopkins, things like that. I do think it's smart to leave a little money available as you get closer to the season, or if there's an injury or if guys don't work out at left guard, to be able to make a move for a veteran to kind of fill that hole, because this isn't some type of team where you're just trying to rebuild or just, maybe make the playoffs. You're trying to win a Super Bowl. So if you have to make one of those moves during the season, you have to have the money to be able to make it. And so those two positions, I would say, other than guard and running back, I think that Cowboys fans should be thrilled with the rest of the roster. I mean, what they did by bringing in Brandon Cooks. I loved drafting Mozzie Smith just because it surprised me, just because it's been so long since they took a D tackle in the first round. But unfortunately, to be honest with you, the only thing that sucks about them taking Mozzie Smith is that for OTAs, it's just hard to really get a lot from. You follow these other teams and that took like wide receivers or quarterbacks. Yeah. You can sit there and come back and be like, they were, 5 of 7 and 7 on 7. Mozzie Smith, they don't have pads on.
Bag drills. It's like,
right. With Mozzie Smith, okay, he's at a position where they don't have pads on. Yeah. And the team has lost OTA practices, and the head coach has been fined each of the last few because of being too physical in the trenches. So that's the only thing, because I really like the player. I really do think he's going to be a great addition to the defense. I think he's got the right mentality, the size, everything there. Like, I think it's a great pick. It just sucks for OTAs because, when you get to go to one of these practices, you want to be able to come back and be like, tell all this stuff. And he looks the part, but also he doesn't have pads on, and it's hard to judge a defensive tackle until that happens. But I love that pick. Schoonmaker, I have no issues with that either. Obviously, the foot right now, it doesn't seem to be anything serious, but much like Jalen Tolbert last year, you want these guys to be getting as much reps as they can right now. And so it kind of not great that he's not out there right now. Overshown, I think, because of Dan Quinn, can move him around and use him as kind of a chess piece. They're going to start him at weak side, and obviously he'll be a big part of special teams. I know Dan Quinn loves Fahoko, so I could see him getting in the mix maybe
He's the
earlier than
one.
some. Yeah, some people think. I think he could get in there. So, and then you mentioned Awesome Richards. You know, he has the chance to play some guard. He obviously played tackle at North Carolina. That could be a really interesting one. That's the thing about their offensive line. Like you feel good about pretty much every position but left guard, but they do at least have some bodies that where they're at, like a Josh Ball, a Matt Waletzko, a Chuma Edoga, Awesome Richards. There's guys there that you would think at least one person out of that group would kind of rise to the top. I mean, they've been in the building outside of Richardson or outside of Awesome Richards. These guys have been in the building. They should be able to compete and contribute something there. But I mean, it's not a super sexy draft class, but I think it's a really solid one. And with how the Cowboys have drafted, I just really feel like you have to give them the benefit of the doubt and see how this thing plays out. But I mean, I really like the Mozzie Smith pick.
Yeah, and John, great insight. And you almost buried the lead on two topics because I want to talk about this roster now that we've talked about the draft. And I also want to talk about that left tackle and that left guard position. I know you had a long day at work, so I don't want to hold you too long.
No, you're fine.
But I also and we definitely got to get to OTAs because I think that's what the people really want. Some people on here, and shout out to the chat box too. Shout out to y'all. Somebody wants your starting five, John, from Duke basketball. So I don't know. We might got to get some of that from.
All right.
But when you talk about Mozzie Smith, I think that it was so impressive to me that the Cowboys said, we have a weakness. We need to attack this weakness. Receiver was sexy. Possibly trading back was sexy. But just the fact that they said, hey, you're not going to bully us anymore up front. And I think that, like, with him and Hankins, like, I really do believe that that is like that was the plan. Like, hey, we're gonna make sure that now you're just not gonna be able to line up and run the ball on us. And I really like that. So I have this thing, right? And we'll get to OTAs in a second. But I have this thing, John, that I've said for the longest, the Cowboys have been built on great offense and defense that is just decent. John, the truth is, and my buddy Vash Nabardi is here. Vash is definitely one of the pioneers on YouTube. Joe Rod, I showed his comment on here. We do a lot of work together, so shout out to both of them. April, everybody in the chat. John, I truthfully believe that your best player is on defense, and I truthfully believe that your defense is now the better position group on the team, the better unit, rather. Do you agree? How do we feel? Because you said Cooks, but how about Gilmore?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I started covering a team in 2011. There's no question that this is the best defense since then. It's the first time that I do really think it's become a defense first team. I think that they have all the pieces to potentially be the best defense in the NFL. They filled all of their holes. There's not a spot where, that's the thing, is that most defenses, and a lot of it because of injury and things like that, you're going to have some type of a weakness. We saw it with the Cowboys last year during the back end of the season. When you lose Jordan Lewis, you lose Anthony Brown, and all of a sudden that other outside corner spot became kind of a weak spot. Now you go out and you go get Gilmore. That shores that up. You go get Mozzie Smith. You re-sign Jonathan Hankins, re-sign Donovan Wilson, re-sign Leighton Vander Esch. There's not really any holes there. If that crew stays together, and then on top of it, probably the biggest off-season move is that they were able to somehow keep Dan Quinn again. So you keep all of that together. I mean, the recipe is there for them to be just a dominant defense that I think will really help the offense early on in the year, because there could be some hiccups early. There could be some growing pains with just an adjustment period with Mike McCarthy calling plays. And that defense single-handedly will keep them in those games. So even if there are some issues, maybe there are some, communication things or stuff like that early that maybe leads to a turnover here or there, you have a defense that can go out there and hold a team to single digits, hold a team to 14 points. So because of that, there's no question. It's been a complete turn. And I think a lot of people would tell you that, hey, that's also when these Cowboys, you go back to the 90s, 70s, 60s, they're at their best when they've had a really good defense. but Jerry Jones loves
Yeah.
the offensive attention.
Yeah.
Jason Garrett was offensive first. Clearly, you could tell by the way. I mean, Jason Garrett's first draft pick that set the tone. I mean, it was Tyron Smith, and they could have
Yeah.
taken J.J. Watt. I mean, that right there is a move that really shows which way you're
Yeah.
going with this, and you couldn't go wrong with either. I mean, that they're both obviously great players, but that signified which way they were going. Mike McCarthy, his first pick, CD Lamb,
Yeah.
Now he comes back and gets Micah Parsons. And I mean, now all
That's
of a sudden you got a beast on your hands. And so
yeah.
Micah to me is what is kind of sped this whole process up. Obviously Trayvon Diggs is outstanding and there's other key players there, but it's solid across the board. And I just, I can't say it. There was not another time it's even close to being on this level that since I've covered the team defensively.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think people, it's kind of like a retooling of your mind. Like, hey, they may say we want to play football to throw our defense layups. We may want to get out of games because we know this pass rush, and we'll talk about some of the guys that you're watching out at OTAs. The truth is, the best player on this team is Micah Parsons. I did my pass rush rankings. I've been watching a lot of film, and he literally is him and Nick Bosa. Like when you talk about tiers, and then you could throw Myles Garrett in there, but like that's significant to have a guy that can get the pass rusher the way that he can. It's significant, and you can really build the rest of your team around that because hey, they have these guys like Fowler and Sam Williams and all these other defensive ends and even Tank Lawrence, who's played good football. But the fact that you have that guy who can take over a game and now your back end looks good and your D tackle situation is shored up, or we think it's shored up, it's something that we really need to watch for. Now, we're going to come back to left tackle and left guard, John. And Vach might have something to say about this because he knows how I feel about Tyler Smith at left tackle. I'm the biggest Tyler Smith stay at left tackle fan there is, but I see why people will want him at guard. Now, John, everybody here right now wants to know, what are you seeing at OTAs? Who is standing out? Who looks different? And it's tough with Mozzie Smith. They're not in pads, so it's just drill work with him. But to you, you can give me 5, 6, however many you got, John. Who at OTAs looks different? Who has a different swagger? Who doesn't look the part? Talk to me.
I would say I lean subconsciously, not on purpose. I don't do this, but I feel like I lean towards watching the offense more. Yeah. And as long as they can stay healthy, I think a lot of people are going to be really thrilled with what the receiving core does. I just think,
wow.
I don't think CeeDee Lamb is like topped off. I still think he's got another level to go. And Cooks, like what we've been seeing a lot of, like both CeeDee Lamb and Cooks can both play in the slot. And Cooks, just his veteran experience, his speed and all of that just seems like that's just a good fit with that. And then the probably the biggest one is just Michael Gallup looks back to being like old Michael Gallup. And so if you have those three guys all playing at a high level, all potential, 1,000-yard type guys, I just feel like you're in a great spot, because with that defense, everything else should take care of itself. So I would say the receiving core has probably stood out most to me. Defensively, I just feel like, I know there was a storyline about a month ago about how Micah Parsons would just be defensive end, and that's just not happening. They're using Micah Parsons the same way that they have been, where he's standing up, he's moving around the line, predominantly rushing the passer like you would expect. I mean, he's a guy that is capable of a 20-sack season, so you should have him rushing the passer most of the time. But you can just tell they're not going to take away that element of him moving around and just be like, hey, you're our right defensive end. That's just not happening. So I would say I went in wanting to see where, they would be having Micah a lot. And so far from what we've seen, it looks pretty similar to what they've been doing. And I think that's a good thing. Outside of that, I'd like to sit here and tell you that I feel like Tristan Vizcaino is going to be their kicker, but I don't think that'll be the case. So while they do the special team stuff, Deuce
Vaughn, stay with Deuce Vaughn. Tell us what you've seen from Deuce Vaughn, the twitchiness. Is that real, John? Is some of that where everybody's excited because the dad and the interview?
Yeah.
And it's not a knock, right?
Right.
What have you seen from Deuce Vaughn? Will this work?
I think it will. I mean, I do think he's an NFL player. I just have a little bit of
that's fair.
Kind of show me and I'll believe it because there's just so much talk, so many years in a row that we go out to training camp, and whether it's, we're going to start getting Cole Beasley involved down the field, and you're just like, all right, I'll believe, yeah, okay, let's see. Then it's the Tony Pollard. He played some slot at Memphis. They're going to use him more as a receiver. Never happens,
Never.
So
Yeah.
it's, they got Kevontae Turpin. They're going to start integrating him more in the offense. Never really happens. So it's kind of one of those things where if you can get Deuce Vaughn the ball in space, he's going to take care of everything. I will say, though, the thing that stands out most about him, and anybody that's at these OTAs will tell you, is, he is really small. Really small. Yeah. So that's the thing. You're going to have a package of plays to get him the ball and get him involved. And so as long as they can do that, I do think he can be a good NFL player. I don't think this is just I know some people look at it as just, his dad works for the team, that's why they did. No. He's obviously a good player. It just, I'm interested to see how he works in. What would have been really interesting to me is if, let's say, in some hypothetical world, it's we'll say it's 2017, and instead of them having Tony Pollard, they're pairing Deuce with like a 2017 Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Whereas now that really, to me, is real interesting because I can see them using them both a lot at the same time. Maybe they'll try and use Tony and Deuce at the same time. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. But there's just a part of me that kind of wants to see that first. But he's made some plays in OTAs where you're like, you can see his athleticism. You can see how he's going to be a handful when you get him in space because he is so quick and he's going to be hard to bring down. So that's definitely been noticeable too. So it's only been 2 OTA practices. And like I said, them being fined and losing practices these last 2 years in OTA, you can tell that they've really tried to make it, 75%, 80%, not wearing pads. They're really not trying to do anything that's going to cause them to lose any more practices in the future. So it's hard to sit there and say anybody's just like blown you away.
Yeah, half speed.
Right.
Just a lot of teach on the field. I'm sure that's just that install. And I don't, for people who don't know, there's just a time when they're installing sets. I'm sure they're doing red zone period, things that they like, things that they don't. And with Mike, I'm pretty sure he wants to take it super slow because he wants to make sure that when it's time, these guys can play fast. Now I've heard it, they're really playing around with tempo, which is cool. But even in that, that's still like a lot more teach. One of the misnomers about Brandon Cooks, and then there's 2 other people that I want to ask you about OTAs wise, is that Brandon Cooks he's been around and he's played for a lot of teams, so maybe he can't play. And I just think that's false when you watch the film. And to you, John, does he look still like he still has that pop in his legs? Because the truth is, you said something with CeeDee Lamb that I agree. And, Vach is huge on CeeDee Lamb. I'm huge on CeeDee Lamb. I think that Amari Cooper leaving the Cowboys, while it may have hurt the receiving core, I think it allowed CeeDee Lamb to blossom. I think that CeeDee Lamb has top 3 potential in this league. He just hasn't had the opportunity in the play caller to say, we're going to make sure that you are getting every opportunity to get the ball in every which way. Now, they moved him in the slot, but there were still times where I said, hey, let's get him the ball in space right now. But teams were allowed, like San Francisco, they bracketed him a lot. They did certain things, say, hey, we're not going to let CeeDee Lamb beat us. Dallas ended up moving him back on the outside in that game, and they had some success. But long-winded answer, can Brandon Cooks still consistently beat a number 2 corner to you, John, what you've seen right now?
Yeah, for sure. I will say they haven't done anything where they, really let him just open it up and let's say Dak throw him a deep ball. Like there hasn't been anything like that. They've been doing a lot of 7-on-7 red zone stuff. So we haven't seen that, but yeah, he certainly looks the part. And for where he's at in his career and everything that he's seen and done, even if it was just, a tick slower, I don't even think that would be an issue because I just see him being such a savvy veteran that it's going to be about getting to the open spot. He's probably not going to be seeing a top corner because, like you said, all the attention is going to be paid to CeeDee Lamb. So he's going to see a lot of favorable matchups, certainly more favorable than what he was seeing in Houston. And then the fact that if Michael Gallup is what he says he is and what we've seen so far with him being now 2 years removed from that knee injury, one of those 2 should eat every game. There's just no excuse for them not to, where they are in their career and their athletic ability. So yeah, because of that, I think Brandon Cooks will be fine. And he's a guy that frankly, just the Cowboys liked a lot. They were going to trade for him last year during the season. They couldn't get it done. So that's why they circled back to it this offseason. Clearly Mike McCarthy likes him a lot, likes what he brings to the offense. So, that's the guy that's calling the plays. If he likes him and he wants him, that makes a ton of sense. And then also the fact that if they were kind of shaky on Cooks and thinking, hey, I don't know where he's at, I don't think they make the trade.
Yeah.
And then the other part is I think they would have drafted another wide receiver or even added another wide receiver in free agency. And I don't see that being the case. I think that 3 is set. And then I think the 4 spot is it should be Jalen Tolbert. And then behind that, then that's when you get Kavonte Turpin and Semi Fehoko. And I think that'll probably be the group that ends up making the roster.
And now I want to stay on Tolbert and I want to stay on Kelvin Joseph. So Cowboys Nation right now is getting a lot of information. Well, Kelvin Joseph is working with the safeties, the nickels. He wasn't out there with the ones with Eric Scott. Now, obviously, Diggs wasn't out there, and neither was Gilmore for your guys' session to be able to see the team. Cool. And then Jalen Tolbert, who you hear Mike McCarthy mention him and say, you see the real jump. He sounds like he's made a real jump and he sounds more confident. To you, and this is my thought on Kelvin Joseph. I know there are a lot of people who say, well, give him a chance, this, that, and the third. I had questions, John, with him, first of all, not being able to make it at LSU. Then at Kentucky, there were just coaches who just, he just didn't love football. I mean, good athlete, didn't love football. And then you see him actually play on the edge, and he really hasn't played good corner for this at all. I can't remember a game where he's just had a game like, okay, he could possibly be him or Nashawn Wright. He could possibly be an edge corner. Then the Jacksonville game happens. It's just awful. And so to me, I think this is more of a indictment and just speaking to the fact that they've already put Scott out there. Coaches are very intentional. There's nobody who's going to tell me different. So they've already put Scott out there. He's a rookie. Bland is as soon as Gilmore is off this team, Bland is your next edge guy. Whether it's now, later, injury, Bland has shown enough to me that he's your next edge guy. Arrow up, arrow down for Tolbert and Joseph. What are your thoughts there?
I definitely think it's an arrow up for Tolbert.
Okay.
Just talking to him on Thursday in the locker room, one of the things he was saying is that obviously he doesn't get off to the start that he wanted. And then he started, getting a little too much in his head, thinking too much as opposed to reacting and using his speed. And just with him having a full year with the Cowboys, spending a lot of time in the offseason, working with Dak at his house, at the facility, he just really feels a lot more confident with what he has to do, where he needs to be so he can play fast. So I think the arrow's up on Jalen Tolbert. And Kelvin Joseph, I can't say it's up. I can't say it's down. It's kind of just, he's kind of right where he has been for me, where I agree with you on that Jacksonville game. It just seems like ever since then, it's kind of one of those things where he has to prove, like he's going to have to earn that spot, and I agree with you with the putting the Eric Scott out there. That is one of those type of things where I'm sure that is a Dan Quinn and, like, hey, he's got to earn this spot. We're not just going to give it to him. They like what he does in special teams, but they need him to be a better corner to keep him on this roster, And so because of that, he's not better, obviously, than Trayvon Diggs or Gilmore or Deron Bland or Jordan Lewis. So that puts you at best at the 5th corner spot. At best right now. I mean, they used a 2nd-round pick on him. That's not what you're expecting. And so, yeah, he needs to have a really good training camp. And then most of all, he really has to show out in the preseason. I'm sure they're going to give him a ton of time. He needs to make some plays. He needs to look like a guy that they're like, okay, this is worth, keeping him on the roster. We see some flashes here of his athletic ability. It looks like he's getting it. But yeah, he's still got to earn it. Like he's certainly not a lock to make the team right now.
Yeah. And see, that's why I want to bring you on, because I believe that I think fans need to have this. We got to have some come to God moments. He's a 2nd-round pick, right, John? 2nd-round pick.
Yeah.
And you went out and you got Gilmore because that other corner spot opposite of Diggs it's just not good enough. Unfortunately, like you need 2 guys. Even if they're not. I mean, I think they're 2 top 10 corners in the NFL. That's pretty good. That goes back to our defensive point where it's like, hey. And it's not the fact that Kelvin Joseph doesn't have the ability. That was never his issue. I mean, you saw his game when he was at Kentucky versus Alabama. He could play football, right? It's the fact that does he love football? And I know that may be some of that Garrett stuff, but it's also like, hey, even if you're not a quote-unquote Garrett guy, you can't go out there and get beat consistently. You can't look like you're a tick late all the time. And I think that was some of what we've seen from Kelvin Joseph. So it's not that people have given up on him. It's not this, that, and the third. I really think that, he just hasn't made the most of his opportunity to me. Um, one more question, John, and I'll let you go. And this is a big one for Cowboys Nation. Left guard, left tackle. I'm of the belief, and me and Vach might fight here. I actually was just texting him. I said, did he want to jump on? He said, no, he's just watching. He enjoying it. Well, he might want to fight me here. I'm of the belief, and I was really big on Tyler Smith when they drafted him, and here's why. I know that in the NFL, development shouldn't and doesn't stop. So, John, I don't know if you weren't covering the team when Tyron Smith was drafted.
Yeah, that was the first draft I covered. Yeah.
Okay. First draft you covered. And so
Yeah.
this is now we can get some objectivity here. So let's get ready to fight, Botch. You can fight me in the chat. Was Tyron Smith as good as Tyler Smith was as a rookie?
Wow, that is tough going back that far. I would probably lean towards Tyron. I just think that Tyron is more dominant at that time. I mean, that is a ways going back. It really, Tyron was so good for a while, for so long. Just that the injuries started catching up for him. Yeah, I would probably give it to Tyron. I mean, I think Tyler was really good last year, and I totally get why they want him to be their left tackle of the future. And I do think he's another guy who's just scratching the surface. I mean, you say whatever you want about the Cowboys, you can't argue that they know how to draft offensive linemen in the first round. So it seems to be a good problem to have. I mean, just imagine if they took him last year, first round, and we're sitting here talking about him like, so do you think he's going to be a starter this year? I mean, it's like it's all you hear is people being like, he needs to be the left guard, or other people being like, he needs to be left tackle. Like he's a key piece now. And that's huge because much like 2011, Garrett was taking over. They were trying to turn that offensive line around. So 11, you take Tyron, 13, Travis Frederick, 14, take Zach Martin. Well, they're kind of in that now because Zach Martin, what's he going to play? Another 3, maybe 4 years. Tyron, this could be Tyron Smith's last season. So, you need some young blood in there. And obviously Tyler Smith's doing that. So where are you on? Do you want to see him at left tackle? Or do you want to see him at left guard?
No, I believe that he's a left tackle. Okay, let me say this. I believe it's going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my neck, right? But I truthfully believe that his skill set early on was probably like, okay, you could put him inside, he's going to maul people. But you kicked him out and it was good, really good. And I think it's so hard to find a left tackle, John. Like there are teams that just completely flop on these guys. And the fact that he's shown you enough, development shouldn't stop. You keep him at left tackle and you keep going. Not to mention Tyron, to me, he's not gonna practice at training camp. He'll have his veteran days, this, that, and the third. The guy got hurt doing walkthroughs. I mean, this is just where we are in his career. And I just truthfully believe that they have to find a left guard, not named Terrence Steele. I don't want to move Terrence. I honestly,
right.
if we're being honest, John, and you could speak on this, I think that Tyron Smith right now is the third best tackle on his team because of the injury. What do you think?
I feel like if you could tell me that Tyron Smith is going to be fully healthy, I would rather have Tyron Smith, but that's such a big if. We haven't seen it. I don't think he started a full season since 2015. So that's why when people talk about what's their best 5, put your best 5 out there. I totally believe their best 5 is Tyron Smith at left tackle, Tyler Smith at left guard,
Okay.
Terrence Steele at right tackle. I don't even question that. But it's like, yeah, that's their best. But if you look at the track record that they've had, especially over the 3 years with McCarthy, they have very rarely had their best 5 out there. So
yeah,
I can see why you bank on, hey, let's just keep Tyler at left tackle. And at right tackle, we know we're probably either going to have Tyron Smith or Terrence Steele over there. I do not buy into the whole Terrence Steele being left guard. I do not think that that's going to happen at all. I think that Terrence Steele is going to play right tackle. I think Tyron Smith's going to play right tackle. If they both are healthy, I think that they'll be just like, hey, well, that's just a problem that we have there. We'll gladly take that. Mike McCarthy would love for all 3 of those offensive tackles to be healthy for all 17 games. That would be a problem. He just hasn't had it since he's been here. So I just think they want to find somebody else to win that left guard spot, Mm-hmm. And hey, that's the thing. Like as the season goes on and injuries happen, who knows? You could see them move him again. I mean, that's the tough part about it. I mean, I as much as I would bet right now that Tyler Smith plays left tackle all season long, if you told me mid-season he's back at left guard because of some issue or something, I wouldn't sit there and be that surprised by it. That's the one thing Mike McCarthy, I remember a couple years said when we were asking him all these questions about, can't remember who was injured, and it was like, oh, what about moving Zach Martin over there? And he was like, well, this isn't fantasy football. And then that, 3 weeks later, a month later, they're moving Zach Martin around because it's just sometimes your hand's forced.
Yeah. No, and to me, you want so you hear things like Matt Waletzko. That was kind of like a curveball playing left guard.
Yeah.
I think they're just throwing bodies at the position. Now that's gotten them in trouble as well in the past. But I don't think it's an issue to where it's like, I really want Chuma Edoga to win the job, John. The film that I've watched on him, how does body type wise, how does he look to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like he's more of a tackle, but I get where you would move him in at guard and, a bigger type guy. I'm trying to think what they have him listed at. Hold on. I mean, I feel like 6'3", 308. I don't know. I get. I mean, if he was really killing it at tackle, he wouldn't have been available. So I understand why they're willing. And then here's the other thing: for them to sign him when they did, they clearly had their eye on him. Like, hey, this is a potential guy that he could fill this role, and it probably won't be that expensive. So, but I look at Asim Richards, and I don't think of him as a guard. He looks like a tackle to me. So, but they've given him some work at guard as well. So. It's tough to say right now. It's like kind of a mixed bag of them just trying to figure out what's going to be the best five possible. The one thing I will say is that if you look at Mike McCarthy's time in Green Bay, it certainly was not an offensive line filled with first round picks. I mean, he had a lot of good production from fourth and fifth round picks, a lot. Yeah. And so and when I mean production, I mean like Pro Bowl production. So to feel like, hey, they just got to find a left guard, you would think that he would be able to do this.
Yeah, and John, to me, that's one thing. They were getting the job done with guys like Brian Bulaga. I don't know if he was a higher draft pick.
He was. Bulaga was a high one. But then they got like TJ Lang. I mean,
Lang.
What's his name was like a fourth or fifth round pick. David Bakhtiari was like a fourth round pick. Yeah,
he's still hanging around. I believe.
Corey Lindsley. I mean, they had a bunch of guys that they were just taking him fourth, fifth round, and some in multiple drafts. And you're just like, they're getting these really good starters out of them. And so because of that, I feel like I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say between Asim Richards and Waletzko and Ball and Farniak, like I would think one of these guys are going to hit. You would think just at a law of averages, like that they're going to get something. And again, I'm not talking about being a Pro Bowler. I'm talking about being a guy that they're like, that's our starting left guard for 17 games.
Yeah. And I think, when it's all said and done, I think depth is what you really want. An injury can happen to any of these guys. I mean, Tyron is jogging on the field and he's out for a long time. So I think an injury can happen to any of these guys. John Machota of The Athletic, he has an article out now. His OTA takes. John, before we let you go, I saw a good question in here, and I want to get your thoughts on your Duke. I know you're a Duke fan.
Oh yeah,
your Duke. Yeah, everybody get the likes up, and maybe if you guys could send one question for John, because we definitely want to just show him love here on the channel. Give me your Duke starting five, John. So your best all-time starting five, because Duke has some dudes, and it's off season, so we can kind of have fun with these types of topics. Your Duke starting five, John.
So point guard is always the toughest one for me because Bobby Hurley won 2 national championships, but I got to go with Jay Williams. He was anytime he was on the court, I always felt like they were going to win. So he's going to be my starting point guard. My 2 guards probably got to be Jason Tatum. My favorite all-time Duke player is Shane Battier, so he's going to be my 3. And then my 4 and 5 it's got to be Leitner and Zion Williamson, however you want to put them in there. And I mean, that's leaving out a lot of guys. I love Elton Brand, JJ Redick.
Kyrie didn't do it for you. He didn't stay 4 years.
He didn't. And I'm honestly, if I'm putting my best one in, then I'm putting Grant Hill at small forward and not Shane Battier. But Shane Battier, he's from pretty close to where I grew up. He's a couple years older than me. I saw him play in high school, and then he goes to Duke. So Shane Battier will always be in mind, but he's not the best small forward. The best small forward, no question to me, is Grant Hill. But yeah, you really can't go wrong with any of those. But yeah, I know a lot of people hate Duke, but it's all right.
Man, the crazy thing about Duke is like I think a lot of people hate Duke until the fact that Coach K is now gone, John, and
Yeah.
it's like college
Yeah.
basketball missed something this year.
No, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people didn't realize that. And so thank you for answering that, John. Let me get a question for you if you don't mind.
No, no, I got time.
Um,
Go ahead.
you got time? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's see. We got John Machota here of the Athletic, does amazing work. If you guys aren't like, I don't go a lot of places for information just because you got to be careful. Some takes are just it's kind of goofy. But John is one of those people who I definitely trust. Let's see. I guess we'll go with this one since chat box isn't really who do you think, John? And this is kind of like a loaded question because it's so subjective. Who do you think will have the best rookie season?
I just don't think for me, there's no question it's Mozzie Smith
Okay.
because he immediately steps in and I think will make an impact right away. And when I say that, I know a lot of people want to see the sacks. They see a D tackle taken in the first round. They're like, hey, we need some pressure. I want to see this guy get 5, 6, 7 sacks. I don't know if that'll necessarily be the case. I just think that their overall run defense will improve a lot. And I think that will be just huge for the rest, because that to me was the only weakness on the defense. And so you shore up that run game. And as crazy as this sounds, with all the talent they have on that defense, they really could lead the league for the third straight year in takeaways because of all the pressure they're going to get and all the playmakers they have there. And it's crazy they let it back-to-back years, but I just think that defense is going to be special this year. And I think Mozzie Smith is going to contribute quite a bit immediately in the run game. And like I said, it might not be the sexiest, big stat box stuff, but I just think he's going to have a major impact on what they do against the run. So I really don't even think it's going to be close. I think Schoonmaker will be fine, but I just think it's going to take him a little bit of time. I think, Ferguson and Hendershot are ahead of him. So I think maybe towards the end of the season, you'll see him making more impact, but I think Mozzie makes impact immediately.
Okay, that's a really good one. And chat box, we have a special treat. John said he has about 5 minutes. I don't want to hold John too long.
No, I got time. It's no problem.
We got time. We can talk our shit. So I want to do this. I want to add in one of my guys.
Okay.
Mr. Voch Lombardi. Can we get claps in the chat for Voch, y'all, please?
Hey,
please.
Look. First of all,
we'll just go ahead and produce too, John.
Listen, humbly, Foots, thanks for having me on, John. Appreciate you. Big fan of your work. I didn't even know that you knew who I was and all that, and I'm just some humble dude from Mississippi. So when people that I'm fans of, they know me, I just get befuddled. So appreciate it. I got a question for you, John Machota, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So me and the round table were having a conversation about this earlier. Do you consider Israel Mukwamu? Do you consider him like a hybrid, his own type of DB type dude? Or where is he on the depth chart for you right now? Right? Because he just seems to be a dude that Dan just kind of holds on until he just deploys, and then he takes away like one of your top receivers in a real ass playoff
Great
game.
question. Yeah.
So is he just some 12th defender type guy? Or where is he at? Like behind who? Behind this dude at the nickel, behind this dude outside. What do you think about him? Free safety. What do you think about Izzy?
I think he's a starting safety on a lot of teams in the NFL. It's just this team is so loaded defensively and at safety to get Donovan Wilson back, with Curse and Hooker. I mean, they're so loaded at position. They love Marquise Bell. I mean, they really feel like they have like 5 safeties that you can put out there as starters. So with Mukwamu, it's like they're just trying to find a way to get him on the field. So that's where you might see him be a little bit more at nickel and help out in some other spots where, hey, maybe at the end of the day, that's not his absolute best position, but it's like they want to get him on the field some way, somehow, because they feel like they have a really good player on their hands. And so, yeah, he's traditionally, I would think if he's on most teams, he's probably your traditional safety. But one of my favorite things about Dan Quinn is as great as Tom Brady is, and I would never take anything away from Tom Brady, I was always fascinated with how from week to week, it seemed like Belichick on defense just had something different from everybody. It was never going to be the same thing. And maybe I appreciate it more because I'm coming from covering the Cowboys where Rod Marinelli was just so prideful about this is what we're going to do and this is how we do it. And to see Dan Quinn just constantly moving pieces around, it makes you, really look out for a guy like Mukuamu. It makes you, when they take Overshown in the third round, go like, yeah, maybe he did this at Texas, but I can see Dan Quinn having a totally different plan from him. When they take a Fehoko, you're just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, San Jose State, but because of Dan Quinn and the way he moves pieces around, you're just kind of like, man, maybe this thing will hit. You just give him the benefit of the doubt. But no, I think this could be a huge year for Mukuamu. And I will tell you this, in that locker room, like, he is one of the loudest talkers in there. It's always him and J-Ron Curse. And I mean, amongst the entire group, like, he is not shy about anything. He's a lot of confidence from Mukuamu. I think he's going to have a good year. The thing is, though, is if everybody stays healthy, which obviously they want, it's just going to be hard for him to get as much playing time as he probably deserves.
Well, see, this is why it's interesting, though, right? Because we were just saying this in the roundtable chat. Like, I don't think he's going to get on the field depending on if somebody, I think they could be totally healthy, right? But if we just run into a matchup where he got a big tight end or something like that.
Yeah.
I just think Dan has a package to where Izzy is just starting 12th dude, and that's different than everybody else. And this is important because the whole Kelvin Joseph Jordan Lewis added Izzy in the dude tweet, but they ain't had Kelvin, right?
That was interesting.
He had Marquise Bell on there.
Yeah.
Over Kelvin Joseph. When he tweeted that, I knew that was going to get a lot of response to it.
and that's where I'm saying, like, we got to read between the tea leaves here. Listen, how does Kelvin Joseph, the safety room is the deepest room outside of DN on the team. So how will he play? There's no way.
I think what they want to do is, I think they want him to kind of cross train in the nickel spot, because they ultimately look at, like you mentioned earlier, about Bland being the future at that other outside corner spot. So it's like, yes, Bland plays on the inside and he can be successful there, and he might even be your best guy there, but they want to make sure that he has the ability to play on the outside too. And so, last year's such a great example, because you lose Jordan Lewis, you lose Anthony Brown. It just shows you how much depth you need there. And so I think that's why they're trying to work him there. So, like, maybe it's, hey, we'll go into the season, Jordan Lewis will be our nickel, but Kelvin, be ready, because maybe you're the next guy up there. But I do think he has to show a lot. Like, I don't think he's on this team for certain right now. Like, he's going to have to show that, he's worthy of one of these roster spots. So I think they want him to kind of catch their attention and be like, okay, we have to keep him on here. He's going to have to do something to make that happen.
So it's way too soon, though, right? Like, we got so much time to talk about this. We don't have to waste time to talk about it right now, but we are. So let's just, so it just feels like it's going to be 10 DBs that's going to make the team, 10, 12 or so DBs. Where do we go short? Like, where can we possibly go short? Because I don't think linebacker is a great place you want to go short, because hell, we already short. Offensive line seems to be a place where they want to go heavy. Do you go short at running back? I understand we got this new little rule where, like, the whole quarterback thing is different.
Right.
They are begging to keep Turpin on the team. And people think I hate Turpin. I just think it's hard to make I think it's hard to make the team if you're not Devin Hester and not doing nothing at wide receiver, right? So it's just going to be hard to keep some of these miscellaneous guys, not miscellaneous, just some of these roster spot 42 to 53 guy. Like, it's going to be hard to get those guys on the team with so many D linemen you want to keep. You're going to have to keep linebackers. You're going to have to keep these DBs. Like, where do you go short there? Roster building.
So I do think that I don't think they'll have a problem keeping 10 DBs. I really don't. I think because a lot of them will also contribute on special teams. So I don't think that will be an issue. I think some of the defensive linemen that have been on this team in previous years are going to be on the bubble, some Neville Gallimores and guys like that. And then at linebacker, you probably only keep 5 there. Running back, that'll be an interesting one, because like, you could go 4, but you might only be able to go 3. At tight end, I think that they'll probably go 4. So maybe Turpin is in danger, but the problem is that, like, Deuce Vaughn would really have to come on and really earn their trust as a returner for that to happen. And also Turpin would have to not look like he's contributing very much offensively, in camp or in the preseason for them to move on from them, because I really do think that they would like to have Turpin on the team, just because of his ability to kind of break one, even though we didn't see it as much as maybe we thought coming out of the preseason. So it'll be tough, but I honestly, I don't think that they will have a problem keeping 10 DBs. I think they're good there.
I think so. When you talk about players who may be in trouble, in the chat box has kind of jumped in. A couple names kind of mind for me. I think people have overestimated the tight end room and said, well, We got rid of Dalton Schultz. We're fine.
Mm.
And I think we may need to pump the brakes on that, John, because I think what's happened is like you start watching the film, you start getting some of these vibes that like Hendershot is good. He can show flashes, but there were
Is he
also a lot
safe
of
though?
brain farms.
Is he safe?
Yeah, like I mean, and then another player that I want your thoughts on that everybody kind of wants to know about is Jabril Cox, because I think that they like Overshown, and he's kind of like a bigger version of what they would ask Jabril Cox to do.
I think Cox was headed in a good direction up until
Okay.
that injury,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's the thing. Like, you don't know how he's come back completely. And just from seeing stuff at OTAs, I couldn't tell you for certain that he's all the way back from that knee injury from a couple of years ago. So that will be a big determining factor there. If he's not flying around like he was before the injury, yeah, then he's obviously somebody that could be, on the chopping block for sure, especially with them taking Overshown in the third round. But linebacker is one of those that's like, man, you'd hate to lose like Damone Clark or Leighton. I mean, it's pretty thin after that in terms of like
That's what I was
accomplished
saying.
guys that you can trust. But yeah, tight end, Ferguson's just he's going to have to step up big time. He's going to have to be the guy that really takes on a lot of that Dalton Schultz role, particularly in the red zone, things where I know Schultz wasn't the biggest of big game playmaker types, but Dak was really confident in him and trusted him in a lot of big situations. And so as long as Ferguson and Hendershot are able to build that trust with him, Schoonmaker, I think all those guys are good. I do think that they're going to keep them 4 tight ends.
Okay.
So I think all of those guys are safe, because if they're not, then they would have to go out and sign somebody or add somebody after teams trim their rosters down. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be an issue as we sit here today. But if we got into the season and the tight ends weren't as productive or something, I wouldn't say it was a complete surprise, just because it is a type of position. It does take for some guys a couple of years to really get it going. It certainly did for Schultz. He wasn't like this early in his career like he was, the past couple of years. So yeah, it's a spot to certainly keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think people really underestimate how much Dak trusted Schultz to be where he was supposed to be. I think that we've seen, especially with Hendershot, he's a rookie last year, but we've seen him kind of struggle with that and with the brain farts. And then you're hearing the OTAs. Some people it's like, oh, that's not a big deal, the drop, the Eric Scott thing, but with everything surrounding Dak with the interceptions and they're not on the same page, the last thing you want is training camp is happening. And then we know Dak's not going to play much in the preseason. So when this stuff starts to build up, it starts to like, okay. And then, Schoonmaker, he has had some injuries. That's what we haven't talked about a lot. Schoonmaker's a physical guy, all that blocking, great pro system, Harbaugh, I get it. But he has had some injuries. This is something to also keep an eye on. So that's, kind of my thoughts.
This is my last one. I just got this question for both of y'all. I'm gonna say this and leave. Is it a myth that we need a short yardage / goal line back? Like Zeke did great things, man. Shouts out to Zeke, right? But I just don't want to manufacture a reason to, just to try to keep somebody for whatever, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, just use Malik, just use Rojo. Like, let Dak do it. Because whenever Dak is doing third and short, fourth and short quarterback sneaks, Dak will get 30 yards on the damn quarterback sneak. We saw this. Just put anybody there and run behind Zach, run behind Tyler, give it to Deuce. They can't find them, right? So, and that's just something that, Cowboy fans have been saying since Zeke is gone. And I really don't even know how great Zeke was at being like, just run. So we'll see. We'll see. Can anybody just get 1 yard and fall? I'm just asking, right? Is it a myth that we absolutely need to have some bruisey, big goal line done?
That's a great question.
Oh, I don't think it's a myth at all. I'm on that side of I think that they're missing a back. I really do believe that. And the reason why I say it is because like I was in favor of, and I thought it was the obvious decision to part ways with Zeke, where the contract was getting and all that. But he could eat up a lot of carries. And the issue I run into is that his 230 carries, like, I don't know enough. I haven't seen enough to make me feel confident about Malik Davis and Ronald Jones taking that over. Now they can show that. I mean, I expect both of them to play a lot in the preseason, but I don't know that right now. And so because of that, there's a part of me that I look at Tony Pollard as I need Tony Pollard as healthy as I can possibly have him in January. I don't care about making the playoffs. This team is supposed to make the playoffs. I need Tony Pollard to be healthy in January. I don't need Tony Pollard getting 20 carries against the New York Jets. Because I don't care about that game. This team should win enough. This team should win enough games to be in the postseason. I saw what this team looks like with and without Tony Pollard. I don't care about him competing for rushing title in the regular season. I don't think his carries need to be that much more than they were last year because I want him as healthy as possible for the postseason. So I don't mean they need another back because they need to go spend money to get Dalvin Cook and really get somebody that's like a game breaker. I need someone that can eat carries that you can trust, that is not going to fumble the football. You can trust him in pass pro. You can trust him in goal line. You can trust him to get, 3rd and 1 situations. He can take hits. He can stay healthy. Maybe those guys are on the team. I don't feel I'm 100% certain that is the case right now. And like I said, they have all training camp and preseason to prove it, but I would be keeping a little money to the side just in case to maybe go get a Leonard Fournette if I have to, like something that's cheap. I'm talking about. I'm not spending much money on the position, but something that might help out and might be something that can help put me over the top. And again, it's because I just seen what this team looked like with and without Tony Pollard, and I don't care about what he does during the regular season.
Hey, real quick, can everybody put a heat emoji in the comments? John, you just brought a fastball because you know what? We 231 carries. We haven't thought about that. And the truth is this: short yardage. I agree with Vach. You don't need a big back, but we do need somebody who, because I think that they want to keep Tony really and truthfully between 17 and 19 touches. Not even maybe 14, 19 touches. Not even carries. I don't like Tony over 25, 20 carries. Like, that's not his game to me. I think he can do it, but to be like that lead guy, you made a great point. We need him when it matters against those teams. And so that's a good point. Like, where does the rest of that production come from? Rojo, he had I'll let you jump in real quick, Vosh, but Rojo had a decent start to his career. Then it was like he kind of tailed off. The unknown is with the two backs that we just drafted, with Lukey and obviously what's my guy's name? 42.
Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, with Vaughn. But I mean, like, you're not gonna ask Deuce Vaughn to come in early on. No. He'll be a fan favorite just because he'll be a fan favorite, but you're not gonna put that on him early on, I don't believe. So that's a good point. Now, Vach, I want to say this. Go ahead, Vach.
Deuce Vaughn carried the ball a whole bunch in college, in Kansas State, versus like real life competition. Now, I'm not saying that you need to give Deuce Vaughn 400 carries a year, right? But you can give the Deuce Vaughn, all right, we're done here carries, right? Like, Tony doesn't have to be in the game at the end of the game. And we've seen Tony be the man. We don't need to baby Tony. I don't think Tony needs to be babied into 17 touches. Now, if you say 17 carries and 8 catches, then sure, fine, Foots. But we don't have to baby Tony. And we can running back 2 by committee. We could just give all of them dudes like 1 carry from Malik, 3 from dudes, whatever. And look, those 200 some odd carries that we missing from Zeke, you can give 90 of them to Tony. How many first downs did we see Zeke go for 1 yard and go, boy, I wish that was Tony to get 6? Like, that's where Tony's carries are going to come from. Yeah, Tony's going to obviously get an uptick as he should, but I don't want to look at this like I'm babying Tony. I think Tony can do it, and Tony can man the low. And look, Tony's still fresh. It ain't like Tony's been playing these 4 or 5 years. Tony hadn't really been getting a whole bunch of carries. So then he's on franchise tag, and I don't think he's going to be back next year. So use Tony up. You know what I mean?
No.
The one I lean on all of this is Skip Pete. And, as reporters, we're not supposed to say this because we want everybody to be as open as possible. But last year during the bye, when we got the assistant coaches, I thought Skip Pete was probably a little too forthcoming when he compared, Zeke to the like the big body Benz, and compared Tony Pollard to the race car, where he was talking about how, with that sports car, when you sit there and you're giving that many touches to, it has a chance to hit the home run, but the more touches you give it, that lessens the chances of the home runs. And so, you might be able to get Tony 20 carries a game, and maybe you still end up with the same yardage total that you got when you gave him 15 carries a game, because that's just the kind of back that he is. And so, maybe everything's fine and maybe it works out. And since I've covered the Cowboys, when it's been a committee backfield, it just hasn't been great. So it doesn't mean it can't be done, but it gets to the point where, like you said earlier, about how many guys are they going to keep? Like, how many running backs are they keeping on this roster? Because at the same time, couple of these dudes are going to have to play on special teams. And I'm just interested to see how it works out. It could. I mean, don't get me wrong. It might work out. Maybe Mike McCarthy makes it work. But as I look at these running backs right now, I just would not be surprised if they added somebody before the season or as the season gets going.
I think Vach hit it. The one that you need to, if Deuce Vaughn shows he can deal with NFL physicalness, which he did against SEC competition, which was great. If he shows that he can deal with NFL physicalness, I think that'll be the one that you say, okay, interesting. Rojo, you know who he is, and Malik Davis, we're still finding out who he is. But I think Vaughn and Lupke are the two that I think will have the most intrigue. And to be fair, they need to show improve in preseason, like we said earlier. But I think they really need to show improve in preseason. Now, this is one thing that I want to speak on was the tight end situation in the red zone.
I got one more. I just thought about this running back wise, and it's really putting both of y'all points together. And I promise we can go right. I just thought about this. This schedule this year is going to be a little harder, right? Because John just said, "Hey man, I don't care about the little Giants game, whatever." Giants are a playoff team, I get it, but we are playing tougher teams this year than last year. Wouldn't you be in more close games to where you really can't rest Tony like that? Do you need another running back for real? Because honestly, I was of the opinion that we don't need to add any other running backs. But now maybe I'm changing my tone a little bit because, hey, we're playing tougher teams. Then we got playoff run. So do we need to add another dude if we don't feel comfortable giving Tony more than 20 carries? Because most of these games are going to be close. We're playing better teams than we were last year. They're going to be close, and we're going to need offense to put up points. Do we need another running back? Is Deuce enough? Is, the other characters, Malik and all those guys enough? I just thought about this right this second. Do we need to go sign Dalvin Cook or something? You know what I mean? Just what you think about that, Foots? Does tougher teams change anything for you? Tougher teams, tougher games. Does that change anything for you? Is what I'm asking.
I think you're going to get everybody's best shot. You are playing a tougher schedule. I agree. I think I'll say this. We'll know early on, Vach, if they trust these young guys, because we'll just get that vibe. I believe. Now, you do make a good point about we'll probably only have Tony for this year.
Sure.
Unless he just goes completely bananas and rushes for 1,800 yards. And I mean, the Cowboys got rid of DeMarco Murray. And he went crazy like that. So, I mean, that position it depends on who you ask. I actually am starting now to revalue the position, but that's neither here nor there, especially when you get guys like Bijan Robinson, those do-it-all Alvin Kamara types, which Tony is. Yeah. But to John's point, if he's not playing in the playoffs, that's an issue because I think this team lost juice. But you also did get guys like Brandon Cooks for that reason. So it's tricky. So that's me. I'll let John jump in on that one.
Yeah, I can't imagine this team going far in the playoffs if they roll in there without Tony Pollard and the current running backs. I just don't see them. I can see them winning a playoff game, maybe two. I just don't see them getting to the NFC Championship game and getting to the Super Bowl. If they don't have Tony Pollard if it's just this current group of backs. The nice thing is you don't have to spend a lot on the position to get somebody that's like a veteran that's why I really think that someone's going to get a bargain with Zeke, because I could see Zeke possibly not even being on a team to start the season and then him going to some type of a Super Bowl contender. And obviously he's not going to have a huge workload. I mean, and him being a guy that, everybody wrote off Leonard Fournette, and then all of a sudden he goes to that Bucs team with Brady, and then he's all of a sudden playoff Lenny again. And you're just like, where did this come from? Well, when you're with a really good team, like sometimes things change, And so my thing is that I wasn't I knew it was time to part ways with Zeke, but that was because of his salary. I still thought he brought some things to the table that, like I said, he could have ate up carries. And I know he wasn't the same home run guy he was anymore. If Ezekiel Elliott was out there and he had not played with the Cowboys and he was looking for a cheap contract, let's say his career had been with the Bengals or something, I would think the Cowboys should kick the tires on him. That's not going to happen now.
Yeah, I think the problem with bringing Zeke back, and John, you're in the locker room. I think he's too big of a name to come in and just take a lesser role. Do you agree with that, John? Or
when they gave 21 to Stephon Gilmore, I knew it was done. You just wouldn't do that. Yeah. I know some people listen to this will think, oh, that's stupid. Just a jersey number doesn't matter. No, that spoke volumes. That was no, that we're just cutting ties. We're moving. Jerry's notorious for that. CeeDee Lamb did not want 88. Jerry loves to force those new numbers. Hey, if you don't believe me, look up what number Dalton Schultz was and see who's got his number now. probably the tight end they took in the second round. I mean, they love to give that, move on to the next thing, get that out of sight, out of mind, start selling new jerseys, like that stuff does play with the Cowboys. And so it might seem like a small thing, but when that happened, when I saw that day when those jerseys came out, I saw Stephon Gilmore's 21. I'm like, oh yeah, Zeke's definitely not coming back.
Hey, guys, this is the insight that you get with Mr. John Machota. Vosh, to your point, I want to say this. I think in the red zone, when we talk about tight end and targets and the stuff that Schultz did, I think what's going to happen is John hit it on on the head when we first jumped on. I think that the receiving core will be better. And so I think that CeeDee Lamb will get more touchdowns in the red area. We didn't really touch on it, but I just want to say that. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be more of a red zone threat. Fade balls, just more designs his way. I just want to get that thought out there. Fellas, guys got anything else? I mean, the fans, they're really excited to have you here, John. Y'all got anything, any notes, any nuggets you guys want to end on?
No, man, I'm good.
Free Terrence, I'm good.
Free Terrence still. Yeah. for if you don't know, John, Voch is he's really like, when it comes to his channel, his film work, O-line is what he does.
Yeah.
And, he has his thoughts. That's why I said we will probably fight, but we didn't fight today, which is good. We'll probably fight later. It's all good.
So you're saying Free Terrence is you want him at left guard?
No. I'm
kidding.
I'm saying we've been live. Mike McCarthy like to run practices with no numbers on the jersey. We have seen Tyler Smith be a real life specimen where he played left tackle on the fly and he did it well. And they said, go back to left guard and he did it well. There is proof that Terrence is a good right tackle. There is proof that Tyler is a good left tackle and left guard. There is proof that that Tyron Smith is at least a solid at this point, a solid left tackle. You mean to tell me on a season where Mike McCarthy is air quote on the hot seat, he's about to roll some dice on one of his best five guys, two of his best five guys switching sides and one switching a position? Not going to be able to do it, sir. This is smoke. And if it ain't smoke, I'm rioting.
Well, I will say this, Mike McCarthy is the one that really was the first person that made me really look at Terrence Steele. It was like, I want to say it was 2 years ago. This is an undrafted guy who's all of a sudden getting thrown into the mix. And Mike McCarthy is obviously during the season trying to be pretty guarded at his press conferences. And he was asked about Terrence Steele and he just randomly started talking about how, like, we think this is a guy that's going to be here, for the next decade. And I was like, wow, they really are committed to him. So anytime like anybody said anything since, because here's the other thing, like the previous offensive line coach, Joe Philbin, this is obviously a guy that's worked closely with McCarthy. He was in Green Bay. They're obviously on the same page with all this stuff. So I don't buy that, like, they're looking to move on from Terrence Steele. I think they want Terrence Steele to be there. I think they want him to be their right tackle of the future. I think there's a good chance this is Tyron Smith's last year.
Yeah.
So if, like you told me right now, who are you betting on their starting tackles being next season? I would bet on Terrence Steele being their starting right tackle and Tyler Smith being their starting left tackle, and that's why they're probably trying to find someone to win that left guard spot. I mean, to be honest with you, I bet you they would love for Matt Farniak to win that job. Like for him to show enough that where they're like, okay, we can go with him. He's not going to be like the greatest, but he'll be solid. He won't make mistakes. We can just roll with this. Not going to have to pay the guy very much. You can kind of just, roll with that. I think they would love for that to happen, but obviously he's got to do it.
Yeah. Matt Farniak is the one. I think if he can handle the NFL strength, I think the technique is good. I think that if he can handle that part of it, it'll be good to go. John, I can't wait to see you out at training camp, dropping the videos, doing what you do. I know they have a mini camp next weekend, correct?
Yeah. That's our best access. Yeah, because they let us. Yeah. We have access next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Like for these OTAs, we only get to go out there once a week. But yeah, next week's probably the best week for off-season access outside of once training camp starts.
Okay, cool. So now that I'm with the in crowd, I'll make sure that I'll be tapping in with you, John.
Yeah, for sure.
No, guys, can we get a clap emoji for Mr. Voch Lombardi and Mr. John Machota, please? Voch is now producing the show, John, so we're good to go. John, I just can't tell you thank you enough. Very humble. I remember our interaction back at training camp, and you've been the same since. And we connected on Twitter, and it's just been vibes, man. And like, I know this underground stuff is kind of cool for you, and I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. Seriously.
Oh, no problem at all, man. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Voch, is there anything that you want to end on? Any fighting words? We can fight it. I mean, it's all good.
I'm not fighting. I'm about to take a shower, go to bed. John, appreciate you. Foot's proud of you. Y'all be cool now. Salute.
All right, man. Hey, for John, for Voch, this is Foots the King. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you guys for liking, sharing, and subscribing. One more fire emoji for Mr. John Machota. Thank you.